As soon as she heard the gunfire, the young mother swept her 3-year-old daughter up and ran through the trees to the ravine and then into the shallow cave near the back of the ravine. She didn't know at that time that the man they would later call Woman Killer and his men had found them here in the northwest corner of present-day Nebraska, and that he was there to kill them. When her eyes adapted to the dim light of the cave, she could see that there were other women in the cave and other children, some infants. All of the women and the children huddled together, listening to the ongoing gunfire, the shouting, the screams. They could see men near the mouth of the ravine, men with guns. And then those men started to shoot into the cave, volley after volley. Inside the cave, screams, crying, then moaning, then silence. That young mother and her 3-year-old, lifeless, still holding on to one another, even in death. And then the men entered the cave, and the scalping began. This story starts about a year before, and about 128 miles to the northwest, near current-day Lingle, Wyoming, and about 10 miles from Old Fort Laramie in Wyoming. Right now I'm standing a few miles out of Lingle, Wyoming. If this was 1854, I'd be standing in the middle of the Oregon Trail, pretty close to it, and there would be immigrant trains, wagon trains coming from the east using the trail and going to the west. It was here on August 18, 1854, when a sick cow wandered away from a Mormon wagon train and walked into this field. Of course, this field didn't look like this at that time. It looked more like this. The cow had wandered into a large Lakota Sioux camp. The Sioux were there to collect annuities. They had been there for some time. The annuities were late, and they were angry and they were hungry. And it wasn't long before a warrior by the name of High Forehead killed the cow. The Mormon owner of the cow complained to the army, and this man became involved. 24-year-old Second Lieutenant John Groton. Groton was the wrong man for the job. He recently graduated from West Point, but barely made it through school. He had virtually no experience, and worse, he was arrogant. He once said that with 10 good men, he could defeat the entire Sioux nation. And now, here he was, leading a group of 29 soldiers into the middle of this huge Sioux camp. Chief Conquering Bear, the main chief of the camp, met Groton as he entered the camp. Groton demanded that Conquering Bear turn over High Forehead for punishment, and the chief said absolutely not. But the chief said that he would give up one of his own horses to make up for the loss of the cow. That was a good offer by anyone's standards, but Groton foolishly refused it. Groton's men must have been scared to death, because across the field from them, and slowly encircling them, were over 1,200 Lakota warriors, men who looked like this, men who had been trained to fight and kill since they were children. One or more of Groton's men must have succumbed to the panic, and they opened fire on the Lakota. Within a couple of minutes, Groton and all of his men, except for one, were dead. The one escaped back to Fort Laramie, where he died of his wounds. Groton was found with over 24 arrows in his body. The only way that he could be identified was the watch that he had in his pocket. The only Lakota who was killed was Conquering Bear. He was shot in the back as he walked away from Groton. He lingered for 9 days and then died in agony. After the fight with Groton, the large Sioux camp split up into traditional smaller bands and then dispersed. The band, led by Conquering Bear and now led by Little Thunder, ended up in northwest Nebraska, where they live peacefully until Woman Killer arrived. This is Woman Killer, otherwise known as Mad Bear and the Butcher, and to the whites, known as Brigadier General William Harney. The Lakota Sioux did not start calling Harney Woman Killer until after what happened here in Nebraska. But he actually earned that name about 20 years earlier when he was serving as a major in St. Louis, Missouri, and he murdered a woman. He thought that the woman, whose name was Hannah, had taken the keys to the house where he was staying. And so he whipped her with a rawhide strap for 3 days. He basically tortured her during that time until she died. The community was outraged by what he had done. The newspapers referred to him as a monster. He tried to run, but he was eventually caught and put on trial for Hannah's death, which is pretty unusual for Missouri, a slaveholding state at that time, because Hannah was a black woman. She was a slave, owned by Harney's father-in-law. His trial? No surprise, he was found not guilty. And on he went with his military career and promotions, all the way up to Brigadier General. And here he is in Nebraska with 600 cavalry and infantry. He's been given a mission to find and punish those Lakota involved in the Groton, quote, massacre. And he has followed and found Conquering Bear's old band, which consisted of about 40 teepees and 200 Lakota, men, women, and children. And he and his 600 men, heavily armed, are going to punish them. This is known as the Battle of Ash Hollow, the Battle of Blue Water Creek, but probably most famously as Harney's Massacre. Because what happened is when they attacked the village, they killed men, women, and children indiscriminately. Troopers shot into women and children intentionally. They ran them down with their horses and sabers. Women and children hid in caves in the ravines. And Harney ordered his men to shoot both muskets and cannon into those caves and ravines. The women and the children screaming and crying and moaning. Later, troopers found that mothers and children had died in each other's arms. Harney and his men ended up killing 86 Lakota, and out of the 86, 43 were women and children. Later, when he was asked about the massacre, Harney said, quote, "I have come to kill Indians, and I believe it is right and honorable to use any means under God's heaven to kill Indians. Kill and scalp all, big and little. Nits make lice." Hi everybody, this is Mike. Thanks for listening or watching the prelude to the Spirit Lake Massacre. Appreciate that. You'll notice that I didn't say anything about the Spirit Lake Massacre in the prelude, and that was by design. Because when we get started and we move along with the Spirit Lake Massacre, you're going to hear about some extreme violence and atrocities committed against children and women and other innocents. And it's hard to take. And when those acts are committed by Dakota Sioux, it's easy to start thinking about cultural differences and other things. And I just wanted to show you the Harney Massacre, which occurred less than 2 years before the Spirit Lake Massacre, where atrocities like that were committed by whites. And that's not by way of offering an excuse to anybody. It's horrible no matter who commits it. But I wanted to let you see that and hear that before you start listening to the Spirit Lake Massacre for what it's worth. Kind of set your frame of mind about all of this stuff. So I hope you will watch a chapter or two as we advance with the Spirit Lake Massacre. Maybe you'll learn something that you didn't know before. Thanks again.